Hi, I'm Christy Cordingley, and this is my show, The Flare Up Show, and this special episode is produced in partnership with Clarissa Burt and In the Limelight Media. I originally created this show to advocate for myself through chronic illness, but today it's grown into a wellness show that's listened to all over the world. I love to practice well-being for the whole being. So if you're ready to rise, thrive, and elevate your life, stay tuned, enjoy the show, and thanks for listening. Welcome to the Flare Up Show, produced by Clarissa Burt and In the Limelight Media. Today, I'm really excited because I have Dr. Emilio Justo. He's a renowned ophthalmologist and cosmetic surgeon. He's specializing in refractive cataract surgery and CO2 laser blepharoplasty. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Very good. Blepharoplasty, yes.
Blepharoplasty.
Fantastic.
With nearly 50,000 procedures performed since 1989. He is a Cuban refugee who emigrated to the United States at the age of 3. His journey underscores the transformative power of patience, perseverance, and self-discipline. His August 2023 TED Talk, Delayed Gratification, Your Superpower to Success, has amassed over 6 million views, very popular, making it the third most viewed globally in 2023. His best-selling book, The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success, followed in June 2024 and became a #1 Amazon bestseller in February 2024. And then he went on to deliver another TED Talk, and he's still a practicing medical physician as well. I just need to say that. At Western U, which has garnered 1.5 million views, and that topic was Unleashing the Drive Within, the Obsession Advantage to Unprecedented Success. And in his personal life, he is married to Dr. Allison Ann Justo for over 20 years. They have 3 teenage children. I have 2 teenagers. Dr. Justo and his family enjoy traveling and exploring exotic destinations. I love that you have time to travel with all that wonderful stuff. Welcome, Dr. Justo.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. It's really a delight to get to know you, and it's a privilege to be here with you. So thank you so very much for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you for your time. I've been really looking forward to this and spending time with you. So let's start off with sort of your beginning. And so your unique background, as you and your parents actually fled communist Cuba, it wasn't like you planned and prepared and was like, okay, let's try out a different country. So what challenges did you and your parents experience when you arrived in the USA and even maybe getting there?
Yes, well, when we left Cuba, I mean, there's a kind of a detailed backstory, which I won't bore you too much with, but we actually left Cuba via Mexico. Unlike a lot of Cubans who come to the United States through Miami, that was not our path. So we fled through Mexico. We stayed in Mexico for 6 months. At that time, in the mid-1960s, there were many church organizations in the United States that were sponsoring entry for Cuban refugees into the country, and that was a legal way of coming into the country. And so the church that sponsored us had us settle in Gary, Indiana. And for
The Music
those,
Man. Yes.
yeah, so you may recall Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. That's where they
Mm-hmm.
originated, right around the time that we settled there.
Yeah.
And then my grandparents came over a few months later, and their church had them settle in a small little college town called Tarkio College, Missouri, in the northwest
Mm.
corner of the state of Missouri. But certainly, I can only imagine from my parents' standpoint, right? I mean, I was a small child. As a child, you have a different perspective than when you're coming over as an adult. As an adult, my parents really hardly knew any English. We came over with nothing but the clothes on our backs. So my father got 2 jobs. He was working at U.S. Steel full time, as well as working as a maintenance and janitorial for the church that sponsored us. So he was doing that. My mother, who was actually very educated in Cuba, she had her doctorate in education from the University of Havana, but coming from a communist country, your credentials don't transfer. So she temporarily relocated 3 hours south of us to Bloomington, Indiana, where Indiana University is, to restudy all over again in a foreign language because she had to learn English on the fly as she was restudying. So during that time, because my parents were so busy, they actually made the very difficult decision to send me away for 5 years to grow up with my grandparents in Missouri. And so my grandparents and I actually lived right on that small college campus. We lived in a dorm room, believe it or not. It was probably 400 square feet, maybe 500 at the most. And at the time, it's interesting when you think back, at the time, it just seemed like a normal home to me, right? I mean, you don't know any better. I went back to visit about 6, 7, 8 years ago, and that dormitory had gone into disrepair. But I knew exactly the dorm room. It was right on the corner of one of the buildings, and my family was with me, and we went and actually opened the door, walked in that dorm room where I grew up, and it was so tiny. And I'm thinking to myself, how did I grow up from kindergarten through the end of fourth grade with both of my grandparents in this small little dorm room? And yet I felt blessed at the time. I mean, I had just a phenomenal, phenomenal childhood and upbringing there on Tarkio College campus, always surrounded by college students. I mean, it was just an incredible, incredible upbringing. And it just goes to show you that sometimes when you're dealt certain perhaps negative things in life that others may view it as negative, really there was just so much positivity that it really, I think, transformed me and helped set the stage for who I've become today.
Hmm. I mean, it's such it's so inspiring because like even with your parents doing what they needed to do for the best of all of you, you still felt very loved. I love that.
Oh,
I
yes.
really, really, I mean that, do you think now like that is part of your success? Was that nurturing and that positivity? Like that's what they taught you, right?
150%. I mean, keep in mind, I was and still am an only child. And my parents also made that conscious decision
Yeah.
not to continue to have a larger family because they didn't have the material means. And so they wanted to devote themselves basically to me. And that love and that nurturing was just phenomenal. And the same with my grandparents. My grandparents were like a second set of parents to me.
Yes.
And so, even though they couldn't provide the material things that we think about today, and like with our three teenage children who perhaps get more material things than we ought to give them, but I didn't have that. But I didn't know any differently.
Hmm.
I just felt the love, and I had friends around me, and it was just, I mean, my life has just been phenomenal. I've just been so blessed that if I had to do it all over again, even with all the mistakes that I've made throughout my life, both early in my life, in my career, I still make mistakes to this day, but I really, truly, passionately believe that it's those mistakes that I have made that have helped shape me into who I am today. So if I had to do it all over again, I would do it all over again, and I would go ahead and make the same mistakes.
Yes. Yes. We have no idea where it's going to end up. I was just thinking today on that note, and if it's okay, can I share a little anecdote with you? But
Sure.
I told you I was doing some workshops today. I was facilitating, and the person that I was facilitating for was someone that I met at a job that I did 15 years ago that I regretted that I had taken and only worked at 3 months and had left. And then that person that I met there, we are still so connected. And then we had this beautiful experience stay together with this workshop. And I thought, you just don't know what, even in those mistakes, even in those times where like, did I make the wrong choice? There's still always things to be really thankful for and be like, oh, I'm so happy that I put myself there, even if it was only for a short bit, right? So I really, really
Absolutely,
agree with that.
absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And life just has a way of throwing us curveballs, good and bad.
Yeah.
A story that I shared. It's really off topic, so forgive
No,
me,
it's okay. Let's do it.
but uh, but I shared in my first TEDx talk was that about now, I'd say maybe about 8 years ago, I'm guessing, that my family and I do like to travel, and there was a period of time there where we were going on lots and lots of cruises all over the world. And so we're in a hotel in Barcelona, Spain, and we're in line to check out to depart towards our cruise ship, that one of those Mediterranean cruises.
Hmm.
And being an alumnus, I should say, of the University of Michigan, where I went to college and medical school, when I'm not at work, I constantly wear Michigan attire. I got the Michigan bling, let's call it. And so I'm in line with my, Michigan polo shirt, my Michigan shorts, and the gal behind me says, "Hey, are you from Michigan?" And and I said, "No, I actually grew up in Indiana, not far from Gary, but I went to school at the University of Michigan." And so then she asked me, "Well, what part of Indiana?" And I said, "Well, I grew up in a little town called Crown Point. You probably never heard of it." And she goes, "Crown Point? My husband grew up in Crown Point." And so she turns around and yells to her husband, says, "John, come on over here." And John walks over, and I look at him, and this was my best friend in seventh grade.
Oh my
I
goodness.
had not seen in 40 years. Because after middle school, I ended up going to a parochial school. He stayed in public school, and our paths kind of went in different directions. I
Hmm.
hadn't seen him in 40 years, and here we are bumping into each other in
Barcelona.
Barcelona, Spain. And to add fuel to this, we were all getting ready to depart on the very same cruise ship.
Oh my goodness.
So, so I mean, it was just unbelievable how, and there's other similar stories. Whenever I wear my Michigan attire, it always attracts attention all over the world. I mean, especially in the United States, but
Yep.
all over the world. I mean, I think the Michigan logo is fairly well known, and
Hmm.
so whenever I'm wearing it, people always strike up a conversation with me. So it's really kind of an icebreaker that I look forward to.
Yes. I love that. I love that. I always find interesting people or people that are interested in life and others around them, interesting things happen to them too. So I like that. That's really cool. So let's go back to success, and that is still success. That's relationship success. But over the last 5 decades, you have overcome a lot. So we talked a little bit about, you mentioned mistakes, and also, just in general, life is not always easy, right? It's a road to success. Um, but you had to really, especially with medicine too, there's a consistency and a discipline that's required with that. So what are some of your accomplishments that prove, as you say, sort of that lack of privilege is not an obstacle to success?
Well, my own story is that here I am, a Cuban refugee, an immigrant coming to a foreign land, basically facing essentially true poverty at the beginning,
Mhm.
and a certain level of discrimination. Maybe not as badly as others experience discrimination, but still, people would make fun, particularly of my grandparents who had heavy accents, couldn't speak English very well. And so that almost made me cry at times. But still, through that all, I was able to just develop a certain resilience and perseverance. And by nature, I don't know why, but by nature, I've always been very, very self-disciplined. My parents never had to push me to achieve anything. I mean, it just all came from within me. So I certainly didn't have the immigrant parents who just hounded me and barked at me. Now, were they the immigrant parents that emphasized education? Absolutely. I mean, they emphasized that. That's what they preached, how important education is for someone to achieve. And so that was ingrained in me, but the self-discipline came naturally. And, I persevered, I became resilient. I overcame a number of challenges. I actually, in my second TEDx talk on obsession, I talk about my medical crisis that I had as a freshman in high school. Just to try and quickly summarize it,
Mhm.
I was developing and had been developing a very, very, very serious case of acne, and not just your regular teenage acne. And I was being treated regularly by a dermatologist, but it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So much so that literally I would sit in the classroom, freshman in high school, and I would have just this incredible pus running down my face, no exaggeration.
It's
And
painful.
you know how embarrassing that is, in front of your classmates and teachers and, girls who you want to impress and things like that. Um, this acne was actually called acne conglobata, which is a fairly rare type of acne. But as I was experiencing all of this, then I developed this fever. And this fever persisted for over a month. And no one could figure out what was going on. So finally, my parents had me hospitalized in Chicago at Children's Memorial Hospital, which is part of Northwestern University. And there they started doing all sorts of tests and scans and bone marrow biopsies. And, the doctors were looking for some sort of insidious cancer or something inside of me. And I'm thinking, what's going to become of me?
Mhm.
And ultimately, after a number of weeks of testing, they finally determined that the root cause of my fever of unknown origin was the severe acne conglobata and all the pus in my face that was seeding my bloodstream. So it took 2.5 months in the hospital and 3 surgeries that I had to undergo. Finally, I was discharged home, free of fever, but my face scarred forever. But yet, it honestly, it didn't stop me. I mean, I was cognizant of the fact that I had scars on my face and elsewhere on my back, etc. But still, it didn't stop me, and I was super active socially. I was active in school clubs, and I was extremely active in athletics back then. And so it just didn't stop me. And long story short, even through all that ordeal, which my parents would commute an hour each way to bring me my homework while I was lying in a hospital bed. At the end of my 4 years of high school, I ended up being valedictorian.
It's
And
amazing.
so, and that wasn't even a goal of mine. It just happened to work out that way. In my talk, I reference a silly story, which I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I'll say it anyway. That halfway midway through my senior year of high school, one of my buddies comes up to me and says, hey, do you realize that with your grades you may end up being valedictorian of our class? And I looked at him and said, hey, that sounds great, but what's a valedictorian? I didn't even know what it was. So again, that wasn't a preconceived goal that I had in mind. It just turned out that way because I was very focused, and I tried to maintain balance between social life, certainly athletics, which I have always loved, and then studying. I studied very hard. I tell everyone, which is true, that I studied harder, more diligently in high school than I did in either college or medical school.
Oh,
Uh, that,
interesting.
that's how much I studied in high school.
Yeah, and like what was your goal? So it wasn't valedictorian. Did you know you wanted to go to medical school? Like because well, that's also your parents' focus, right? Too was like short-term dedication for long-term, like we have a goal here and this is why we're going to keep going and keep our eyes be grateful for where we're at, but also continue to more move towards where we want to be. And you grab that at, like that was also born within you. So to
I
have
think,
goals in high school like that, to be so dedicated, what was the goal that you were like obsessed with?
well, I kind of felt that I perhaps wanted to go into medicine. I say the reason I say I kind of is there was a period of time, and I talk about this uh, in my book. There was a period of time that I was a very good baseball player, as a lot of
Ooh.
Cubans. Let's face it, the Cubans, the Dominicans, the Puerto Ricans, right? We generally tend to be good at baseball for some reason. And I was very good at baseball, and I was a baseball pitcher. And turns out that one of my uh, colleagues in high school who was also a baseball pitcher. He ended up making it into the major leagues.
Hmm.
Um, so for a while there, I thought, man, I really perhaps would like to give this a go. But I sat down, I remember on a Sunday afternoon with my parents and one of their best friends who had helped my mother when she first came to the United States. And we talked about it. I mean, very just logically. And they made the case that, look, uh, statistically speaking, there's a much higher likelihood that if you just stay on focus with your studies and either go into medicine or whatever you choose to do, that you will become very successful. Whereas if you pursue baseball, yeah, you might, but the statistics are not in your favor, right? I mean that's one in
Mm.
thousands or tens of thousands. So I was always very logical, and I always appreciated my parents' input. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna let that go. I'm gonna chase a different dream. And to this day, I have no regrets because
Mm.
my path to my so-called success has been incredible. Like I say, I've been blessed, but I decided, okay, I wanted to go to medical school. And after graduating high school and having all the achievements in high school and a bunch of different awards and that sort of thing, I was fortunate enough to be accepted as one of 10 out-of-state students nationally into the University of Michigan's
Mhm.
accelerated 6-year pre-medical medical program, which was a huge honor. And so that really kind of fast tracked my path through medicine because I graduated high school at 17 and I graduated medical school at the age of 23, which is really
That's amazing.
extraordinarily young. And then I did my 4 years of residency training, and I then started private practice at the age of 27, super young. I have students rotating with me in the office from that are medical students, and most of them are 30, 32, 34. And when I tell them that I was actually starting practice at 27, they can't even believe it.
They're like, Doogie Howser. Nice to
Yeah,
meet you. Yeah.
yeah. So it was kind of a fast track, and,
Yeah,
and
it's amazing.
and it kind of fits into the whole delayed gratification that I preach so much about, and I try to preach to our kids. Hard for today's youth to understand it because we're all so accustomed to that instant gratification, which I totally understand. I mean, growing up in today's society, much different than perhaps when you and I grew up, and we didn't have social media. We didn't even have, at least in my case, I don't know, you're younger than me, but in my case, we didn't have cell phones and things like that. So the instant gratification is something that serves a certain purpose. I get it. You want to order something and have it delivered to you the same day or the next day by Amazon. Hey, I get it. But at the same time, I think we need to really focus on our long-term goals and understand that really very few things in life come easy and come quickly. Maybe you get lucky and something does, but in general, you have to be diligent and persevere and resilient and learn from your failures, embrace those failures, learn from them. And then ultimately, you will get to where you want to go, but you just have to be patient. You have to be willing to pause and take it all in.
Yes, I was as I was preparing for the show, just looking at the titles, and I know that's not what you mean, but I was like, the first one was about pausing, right? The power of pause, and then the next one was about obsession and being driven. I'm like, aren't those opposite? But they're not, right? They actually there's a very specific type of purposeful pause, and then also it ties with the obsession because it's being a right. So can you explain a little bit about your TED Talks and what the two topics were, and sort of what were the key messages and how do they actually fit together?
Yeah, so the first one last year was, like you mentioned earlier, was on delayed gratification, your
Mhm.
superpower to success. And in my core, uh, growing up, as I look back at my life, one of the things that I've always recognized, but I never really verbalized until I gave this TEDx talk, is that I have what I call my Cuban triad. And that Cuban triad is number one, self-discipline, number two, resilience and perseverance, and number three, delayed gratification. And in delayed gratification, if we can resist that immediate temptation or that immediate reward in favor of a later, often greater reward,
Mhm.
that will really serve us much better in almost every aspect of our life. So it's just a matter of pausing, creating a structured plan, laying out goals, not just short-term goals, but longer-term goals, making certain that our goals are ambitious enough and high enough, because I think too often we set goals that are not high enough. And I've been, you know, I've done the same thing myself, and many others do as well. I think we have to really set lofty goals, goals that are achievable, but make them big. Um, Now, just because one has delayed gratification, the second TEDx talk, which is the power of obsession, to the way of getting that unprecedented success. Obsession is not the OCD obsession. It's not the pathological obsession. It's not that negative connotation. I tried to change the word obsession into one of a positive connotation where one really focuses passionately. You got to be passionate. It's got to come from inside you on whatever your goals are, and to not let anything derail you and not let anything stop you. So again, to me, the two are completely congruent with each other. They're not at opposite ends of the spectrum. Just because you're obsessed with a goal doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have delayed gratification. It's just that delayed gratification takes obsession, but it may take obsession for a number of months or years to get to where we want to be. But that's okay, because the taste of it, once you reach that goal, that sweet taste is going to be so much sweeter when you get there, when you look back and look at what you've done, what you've achieved, the obstacles that you overcame. It's just going to feel so great, which is then going to give you a positive feedback. It's going to give you that cycle where now you have the power, the confidence to go achieve your next goal. So it's just a self-fulfilling obsession, which again, I feel very strongly about.
Hmm. I think it's twofold too, and especially if you are obsessed and you have this picture and this vision, the behavior that you're going to partake in before you get there is going to line up more clearly. You're going to make choices, and the physical activities are actually going to be driven by what the future will hold. So it's not even just like delaying gratification. It's this integrity that happens within you because what you're doing actually is like, yeah, you're doing it. You're actually doing what it takes to get there. So it's big bang for the buck when you get there, but also the little victory every day of being like, yeah, I lived my word to myself. This is exciting, right?
Yeah, so absolutely. And one of the things I talk about in my book is celebrating those small victories and
Hmm.
celebrating each milestone. So when you set up a goal, and if it's a lofty goal, and maybe it's a goal for 1 year from now, or maybe it's 5 years from now, but along the way, as you're reaching towards that goal, there are going to be smaller goals, let's call them, or milestones that as you hit each one of them, you got to be able to celebrate it. Now, celebrate it doesn't necessarily mean throw a big party, but
Well, it
but
can,
you got to
yeah.
yeah, but you got to be able to celebrate it and
Yeah.
experience it and breathe in that fresh air of having achieved something that you've worked for, and then that in turn will give you that positive feedback to keep forging ahead. and and,
Hmm.
and that's just in every aspect of life. Doesn't matter if it's your career, your personal life. I just think it's imperative to do that.
Hmm. Agreed. Agreed. Um, I know that you are a very, very busy practicing physician. You're a husband, a father. You have so much constant success in your life. But then you've also stretched yourself to deliver these TED Talks, which aren't small. I think a friend of mine just did a TED Talk this year, and I was surprised at how many months of preparation and practice and fine-tuning. It is a lot. It's not just like get on stage and share your story. It's a lot. It was for her 6 months of dedication. So I can imagine yours as well on like the really big TED stages. And then you wrote this wonderful book, The Power of the Pause. What inspired you? What was so important for you to make sure that you shared on the stage and in writing even more of what you've learned about success with the world when you already have so many wonderful things on your plate?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the best and most honest answer I can give you is as follows. So here I am, riding my stationary bike at home, and I'm kind of doing a little YouTube thing, looking at some videos and stuff, and up pops this little infomercial about an organization that helps people prepare and hopefully land a TEDx talk.
Mhm.
So I thought it was intriguing because I always in the back of my mind wanted to do one of those, but I was just so busy with my medical practice that I just hadn't set aside the time. So I joined this organization. And as I'm really thinking through, because once you join and then they kind of give you strategies, et cetera, and I'm thinking, well, what do I want to talk about? And so
Mhm.
then it occurred to me, gosh, I mean, I've spent so much of my life as an adult, certainly, practicing medicine and devoted to that. But, as one gets a little bit older, your perspective changes. And I start thinking about my own mortality, right? That I'm not getting younger. Now, I hope to continue practicing full time as I'm doing right now for many years to come. But still, you think about these things. And I think, gosh, I have, reasonably still young children who are teenagers. And I wanted to kind of impart a message for them and to leave what I consider to be a legacy. And so at first I wanted to talk about that Cuban triad that I mentioned earlier. But as
Mhm.
I counseled with other, mentors, they said, yeah, it's too much in a 10 to 12 minute talk. There's just too much there. So just pick one of the three topics. And I decided to go with a delayed gratification. So that's really where it all started. And then as well, let me just give you a quick, super
Mhm.
quick backstory. So the way this organization teaches you to do it is they do not teach you to write the talk first. They have you kind of do some bullet points, some high level uh, overview of what you want to talk about, and then you start applying to the different TEDx organizations. And there's about 1,500 of them worldwide. And on average, the data is that on average, it takes about 90 applications to land one talk. And so I started every weekend, because I don't have time during the week. Every weekend I started applying, and it's a huge process. The applications for most of them are pretty exhaustive, and you also got to do like a 1 minute selfie video of yourself kind of explaining in a broad brush what you want to talk about. And so I started applying, and so I do this for maybe 2 months, 2.5 months, weekend after weekend. I get 86 applications filled out and submitted. Then it's all of a sudden it's summer of 2023 and it's time for our family vacation. So we go to Western Canada, so not where you are, Chrissy, but we're in Alberta.
Yeah,
Uh,
where were you in like Banff or Canmore?
we were in Banff. We were having lunch. I mean, we started in Vancouver. I mean, it was like a 2 week trip,
I love
from
it.
Vancouver and then over to Alberta, Calgary. Went to the
Yes,
Calgary.
I was just in Kananaskis a couple weeks ago. So
Yeah,
beautiful.
Calgary Stampede. That was phenomenal.
Mhm.
Um, at Lake Louise, that was phenomenal. But anyhow, we're in Banff and we're having lunch. It's July 5th. I'll never forget. And here having lunch, I get a phone call, and I pick up the phone and inviting me to the TEDx event, which is in 5 weeks from that.
Ooh, ooh.
And, and, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, we still have another week of vacation to go. So by the time I get home, it'll be 4 weeks that I have, and I have to write the talk. I have to practice the talk. I have to memorize the talk, and then I
Hmm.
have to finally deliver the talk. So the pressure was incredible because I just had 4 weeks to do it. So I devoted all my time and effort to doing that and pulled it off. And then as that talk started taking off, my wife said to me, hey, why don't you consider writing a book, which I had not really thought about before. But because the talk was doing so well, I started writing a book. And
Hmm.
then as I'm writing the book towards the tail end, I'm thinking, I'd really like to do another one.
Hmm.
And so this time around, I submitted just one application, just as a test. And a couple weeks later, they do a Zoom interview. And then a couple weeks later after that, I got accepted for that talk. And so
Amazing.
so the first one was after 86 applications. The second one was a 1 for 1. And and so
Get a
that
lot of
TEDx
practice.
talk was at Western University, which is in
Hmm.
Ontario. So
Yep.
here we have two connections to your
Hmm.
motherland, and actually I'm very proud. Just hot off the press as of yesterday, I noticed that talk just now broke 2 million views.
Amazing. Congratulations.
So thank you. So I'm hoping that for 2025, when I can find the time, I'd like to do a third talk.
That's amazing. And what do you hope people receive from your talks? Like, what do you hope people listen and walk away with, or read from your book and walk away with?
Well, I mean, just the basics. I just want them to understand that no matter what your background, what your upbringing, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. Truly, if you are focused and determined and set goals and work passionately from the heart, your core belief, that you can really achieve almost anything, right? And so so I just feel that from the bottom of my heart. It's interesting as I look on YouTube, and I go back periodically, not too often, but I'll look to see the comments that other people leave regarding my talk, and a lot of them are really, very touching to me because you can tell that it's a person who really internalized that talk, and it
Mhm.
really got them thinking, and it really motivated them. Some will say, oh boy, I'm so glad I listened to your talk. I'm now going to really have that obsessive drive to achieve, and I'm going to be focused on my goals. And I think, wow, that's really wonderful. That's great that somebody really took it to heart. And so it
Mhm.
touches me. So I reply back to any of the
Oh,
comments
that's awesome.
that are
Yeah.
left. I reply back to each and every one of them because I value the fact that a person took the time to watch the talk.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you. And where can people find you and find your books and your talks?
Well, the simple way is I have a personal website which is separate from my practice. And
Mhm.
the personal website is dremiliojusto.com, but that's spelled DREMILIOJUSTO.com. And in my personal website, there's links to everything. There's links to the talks if you want to watch them, although you can easily Google them by going to YouTube and just putting in my name. But there's links there. There's links for the book. The book is actually available not just through Amazon. It's available through all major retailers like Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, etc. And also I should mention that for those in the audience who are more audiophiles and like audiobooks, I actually narrated the book myself, which was
Oh,
an
awesome.
incredibly
Yeah.
positive experience. I mean, I would encourage anyone who's written a book to narrate it themselves. And again,
Oh,
part of the reason for doing that is that when I'm long gone, I want both my children, and if at that time there's grandchildren or whomever, I want my voice heard
mhm.
for generations ahead of us. And so that leaves that, again, that legacy piece, which I feel so strongly about. And so the book is available on Audible for any of your viewers who would like to go to Audible.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for your time. We'll put everything in the show notes so people can easily find you. And just thank you so much for sharing everything so beautifully with us and eloquently and articulately. And I'm inspired. I'm very inspired, actually. And I'm kind of sad that it's almost my bedtime because so I'm like, now I'm excited and I'm not going to want to sleep. That's okay.
But
I
thank
can
you, Chris.
handle
It's really
that.
been
Yes.
incredibly enjoyable, and thank you for the opportunity. And I'd like to thank your viewers as well. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Justo.